Hello and thank you, listeners. My name is Luke Mardigian, and you are listening to Be Insured, where we talk about business, leadership, and insurance. That way, on your worst day, when you need it the most, you will be insured. In our previous episode with John, we talked about how to tell when it's time to reinvent yourself. Maybe you feel stuck in a bad relationship, a dead-end job, or the path you're on just doesn't align with what you really want in life. But making big changes is really, really scary, and it seems impossible sometimes. And that's why John swears that there are 3 essential skills you need to master in order to be successful at reinventing your life, and that's exactly what we plan to uncover in our conversation today. Joining me for today's conversation is my awesome co-host,
Eric Gestring with the Mardigian Agency.
And of course, the man of the hour,
John Mashni,
author of
3 Necessary Skills to Reinvent Yourself.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I'd love to quickly recap our previous conversations for listeners. John, tell us, what type of person needs reinvention the most?
Really, it's anybody. I think if you don't reinvent yourself actively every single certain period of time, you're going to be forced to reinvent yourself. If you think about your job, you think about relationships, nothing ever stays the same. It's either getting better or worse, and you have to make a decision. Are you going to make sure that it gets better, or are you going to wait till it gets worse?
That's great. In the book, John, you say there are 4 words that your wife said to you that changed your life.
Yeah.
Tell us that story.
So this was really the beginning of me severely reinventing myself professionally and personally as well. I was working in Flint, Michigan over 10 years ago. I was driving an hour to and from work, running a media department, doing freelance audio and video on the side. I came home one day late. In the evening, my wife was waiting for me, walked in through the garage. She was there. She just gave me this look, and she was clearly waiting for a period of time. She said, "We need to talk." My first thought was, well, this sucks. My wife's leaving me. That's exactly what I thought. But that's not what happened. She said, "John, when we got married 5 years ago, you were happy. You were fun. You love life. You were just seemed like a different person. You don't seem like the same person you were 5 years ago." She said, "Something needs to change." And then she laid out a plan. She had thought about it. She had taken the time to create a plan, and she just told me about it. And we talked about it. It was great conversation, very deep. And eventually that turned into, "John, I think you need to go back to school. I think you need to go to law school. I think you need to leave your job." Simple as that. And it was crazy. But in a very short period of time, 3 months later, I was taking the LSAT. Under a year later, I was accepted into law school. Under a year later, I quit my job. And
your first son is born.
Had a child. Two children while I was in law school. My wife was in a car accident. 9 surgeries later. But we together reinvented ourselves. And going through that process made me just so aware of the importance of the skill to reinvent yourself. It's not luck. It's not something that is just by chance that it happens. It's clearly a skill, and I started to take notes the whole way while I was doing it for myself. And I started to share what I learned with other people, and then eventually, probably 4 to 5 years after I'd done it myself, I said, I need to start writing about this and sharing it on a bigger level. Even though I still practice law, I literally write for 15 minutes a day, sharing what I learned, and now it's just taken off, really. People are really interested in it. I love sharing about it.
Yeah, for me, I was first introduced to it just through our friendship, because you kind of became we didn't have a name for it at the time, but my unofficial reinvention coach. I just get stuck at these points and give you a call, and you'd be like, "Well, what about this story? Did you hear about this one? Or you ever think about this?" What you need to do right now is go watch The Count of Monte Cristo one time. That was how I developed a skill. I think that one is namely probably mindfulness, of understanding where I'm at in my life.
Yeah.
So talk about there are 3 skills. And so when we talk about skills, think about skills in a sports analogy. If you're a baseball player, it's how you throw. It's how you hold the ball while you're throwing it. It's how you hold the bat while you're swinging it. Where you swing the bat, how fast you swing it. It's really those details in life that you have to relearn so that you can become who you want to become.
And here's how I think about it. To me, I discovered 3 different ways that people reinvent themselves. And for each different way or type of reinvention, there's different strategies. But then I started to think about, well, aren't there basic skills that people need? Like, just what does everybody need in order to reinvent themselves? And I started thinking back when I did martial arts. We started with the most basic things: how to tie your belt, right? Toughening up certain parts of your body that allowed you to progress further, like your knuckles, like your ankles, like your toes, like your fingers, right? If you break a finger blocking something, you're not going to last very long. So I started to think about, what are those types of things? What are those essential skills for reinventing yourself? And I came up with 3 that absolutely are essential. And the first one was mindfulness. The second one was margin. The third one was the ability to reflect, or reflection. If you have those 3 skills, you can basically set in motion any type of reinvention that you want. Those are the fundamentals. Those are, hey, how do I tie my belt, or how do I tie my cleats, or how do I, right, sharpen the pencils, get everything ready to go? To me, those skills, if you have them as a foundation, you're really setting the table to be able to reinvent yourself in any way that you want.
You know, one of my mentors sat down with me, and we were talking about transitioning in seasons, and he had me go through kind of an inventory where, you know, he wrote down the main spheres of your life: psychological, physical, emotional, spiritual, financial health. And he had me take an inventory of each of those. And he said, how do you think you're doing spiritually? How do you think you're doing with your physical health? How do you think you're doing with your mental health? How are your emotions? And he went through those things. What kind of process, what kind of skill is that in the reinvention scheme?
Well, I think it's probably linked to a few things. Like, if you want to go through the different skills, right? I think probably each one is important.
Mindfulness.
But mindfulness to me is one that comes to mind when we think of, well, what does that really mean? And I hear a lot of people say, you got to meditate, you got to get one of these apps. I've tried different types of meditation. I'm not someone that meditates every single day. But here's one thing I noticed. When I was in martial arts, I remember walking into class one day, and I was stressed. I was in college. I was studying for an exam, and I had all these other kind of things when you're in college that just happen. It's a stressful time, right? Sometimes. And I remember being very stressed as I walked into class, and my teacher said, "Wow, you look really stressed. What's wrong? Something's going on?" And I said nothing to her. She just looked at me and automatically saw it. And later she said, "I saw your shoulders, the way you were walking. I could absolutely tell you were super stressed." She's like, all she said though was, "Hey, I'm glad you came to class today." But I noticed something that she did that was so incredible. She tried a little bit harder than what I was used to. And she was like a 5th or 6th degree black belt. I was not a black belt at the time. And so I just noticed, like, wow, she is really coming at me. Amazingly though, when she started to punch me, something changed. It was at such a speed, at such a level of skill that was so high, I could not think about anything else while she was punching me. All I could think about was what's right in front of me, blocking what's right in front of me, punching, kicking, reacting. And my mind absolutely emptied of everything else I was thinking about when I walked into the class.
It's like a reset.
It was absolutely. It was just, I could not think of anything else. My mind was totally emptied. And when the class was done, my complete posture was different. And that's when she said, look at yourself in the mirror. You are not even walking the same. I completely forgot about all these tests, all the other stress. And at that moment was just so interesting, so fascinating, so powerful to me, because I emptied my mind. I literally walked in to a room, and an hour later, I completely got rid of all the stress because I couldn't think about anything else. There was no room in my attention span.
Yeah, no mind share.
Yep.
Yeah, 100% was on the punch that was coming right at my face. And if 5% of my mind was focused on anything else, I would have got
hit in the face.
Got smacked.
So why is that so important in your reinvention process? What does that do for you? So let's say you are able to do that, whether it's through rock climbing or martial arts or yoga, basic just meditation, whatever it is that you're doing. Why is that so important in the reinvention process?
Right, because there are moments where you need to make decisions based on reality, not all of the things that are stealing your attention right in that moment. You need to be able to think clearly.
And how do you do that?
You have to empty your mind, and you have to get to a point where you let your mind take over. We don't understand so much about how our mind works, but what we know is that when we create an empty space, our mind will fill that space. And so when you have mindfulness and you practice it, and I think a lot of times meditation fills this role, lots of other things, prayer can, There's so many things. For me, martial arts, I even describe in the book about when I'm cooking and cutting with a very sharp knife. If the knife is so sharp that it can literally do severe damage to you, you have to be so careful when you're using it. There's so many different things and different ways that people can reach that state. But ultimately, we have to be able to think clearly. Otherwise, we're not going to make good decisions and make decisions that are really going to help us reinvent ourselves.
Yeah, I know that's true. I just was talking to the mentor last week and doing an inventory of, all right, what days am I just crushing it, doing really well? I feel in control of my emotions, my mind. I'm making good decisions. I'm getting stuff done. I'm not distracted. And we figured out it was every morning that I went on my back porch and I sit on my back porch and I look at the tree in my backyard and I just watch the leaves blow back and forth for about 60 seconds. And then I have a short little 2-page prayer that I do, and I'll read the Bible for maybe 30, 45, 60 seconds, nothing crazy. And 5-6 minutes later, my mind is completely clear and I crush the day. So I can only imagine if you did this at scale and then went immediately into your reinvention, how powerful that could be.
It's a fantastic skill, and we probably don't have time to cover enough of it, but it is really underrated. In our society, you are bombarded by urgencies, by emergencies, by alerts, by your phone, by email, by people. There's constant interruption,
and then constant lies going through your head. Right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yep. Stinking thinking.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I think that skill leads into the other ones, but once you get that skill, you can really move on to develop the other skills that I talk about too.
It's interesting when I think about everybody I know who's gone through some type of reinvention, whether, following your system or specifically what you speak on or whatever path they took. So many of them get there by learning to slow down and stop doing all the junk that's been filling their life. Because sometimes I was just talking to my wife about this. It seems like no matter what you do, other people fill your time. So it's like, hey, we got nothing going on this weekend. Oh, wait, my kid's football team is in a parade. We have to go there. We have to be there at 9 a.m. So, okay, well, there's like 3 hours of the day gone, so we can't go out of town. It just fills your time. And I know that's just not the most productive way to live life. So how do people, could you give them like 1 or 2 tips on how to build margin in their life?
Yeah, and let me explain too, margin. I think that's what I describe as the second skill, or the ability to create margin in your life. Yeah. If you think about it, a piece of paper, there's margin on the top, the bottom, the left, the right. There's blank space. And if you think about, if you use 100% of your time during a day to do all the stuff that's in the day, you have 0 free time. Well, sometimes that's okay, but what about if something happens and you have to react? What if you get interrupted? What if an emergency happens? If there's no margin, then something else suffers. But if you're using 80% or 70% of your capacity or your total time, and it's not just time, it's energy too, right? It's money too. But if you just use a percentage that's lower, then if something goes wrong, you go from 70 to 80%, you still have some free time. It doesn't ruin everything. And here's the other thing. Tasks expand to the time that you have for them. So if you have a certain amount of time and you say, this is how much time I have to do it, then it's going to fill that amount of time. So
and the opposite is true, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
could rush it.
I think the way I think about it is this. If you're going to reinvent yourself, you have to learn something new. You have to change. You have to grow. You have to take time to learn about an opportunity, or you have to make significant changes.
Yep.
How do you do that? The only way to do it is to have time in your schedule, to have money in your bank account, or to have some other way to basically say, I have enough energy to do this. If you don't have energy, you don't have time, you don't have money, you are never going to change.
Yeah, that's so with margin. I heard Tony Robbins say, if you don't have time to go on a 7-minute walk, then you don't have a life. And I was like, wow. At the time, I was not giving myself even 7 minutes to go for a walk. And I'm going, whoa, that is just right to the root of things, Yeah. So our listeners out there, they want to get their hands on your book. They want to go through the reinvention process. They want to learn these skills. So how do they get a copy of the 3 necessary skills of reinvention?
So it's only offered to people who subscribe to my writing, to get emails from my writing. If you go to johnmashni.com, JOHNMASHNI, you can subscribe right there, and then you'll immediately get taken to an order page, and you can order the book, $7. It's an ebook. There's an audio version you can upgrade to as well. It talks about the 3 necessary skills to reinvent yourself. Hopefully people check it out.
And if there's one thing you wanted our listeners to walk away with, what would that be?
You can reinvent yourself. There's no question. People have done it. Every kind of person. So don't wait.
All right. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's conversation. Make sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at The Mardigian Agency. That's Mardigian, The Mardigian Agency. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on Be Insured.